Hey everybody, welcome to the Team Draft Super League. I'm Reid Duke, joined tonight by special guest commentator Andrew Cuneo. Andrew, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Andrew, this is the fourth week of the Team Draft Super League. Have you tuned in for any of the previous weeks?
I've seen some of each of the previous 3 weeks.
Cool.
I saw you guys take a loss.
Yep. My team, the Peach Garden Oath, we lost the first round to Team Madison. Next week was Team Channel Fireball defeating Scottsdale Foundation. And in week 3, Team Limited Resources, the stream team, defeated Team Gamers Helping Gamers. So for anybody who is just joining us for the first time this week, we play Team Draft here. Team Draft is usually comprised of 2 3-player teams. So that means only 6 drafters at the table, and players sit alternating. So every player is going to be between two enemies, basically 2 players of the other team. You can't communicate during the draft, but you can help each other out after deck building. You can say, watch out for this rare card that I passed to so-and-so, everything like that. And once you get to the games, every player can play every other player until one team winds up winning the best of 9 matches. So Andrew, you're coming off a win in Team Limited alongside Ben Stark and Eric Froelich. You have 2 Pro Tour top 8s in Team Limited. Can you tell us a little bit about, both how and why the strategy for Team Draft is different than a normal 8-player draft?
Well, the why of why it's different is that unlike an 8-player draft where you don't want to hate draft very much because you don't want hurting your potential opponents doesn't help you that much because you aren't guaranteed to get to play against them, and at most you can only play against them in 1 round. In a team draft, you or one of your teammates is going to be playing against the deck that you pass to your left every single round. So anything you can do to hurt that deck or just the decks of the people on the other team just helps your team directly. So there's a lot more hate drafting. There's some kind of tricky strategies where like a pass and cut strategy, which I think has been explained in previous weeks, where you sort of intentionally change colors to mess with the person on your left. There's also a lot more in a team draft because you can talk to your teammates after the draft and learn about what they passed. You can tailor your deck specifically to what the other team got. So a card like, in this format, Blazing Volley, 1 red, deal 1 damage to each creature your opponent controls. You generally don't want to put that in your main deck in an 8-man draft. But in a team draft, you can get to the end of it, you can look at what colors your teammates are playing, and you can think, okay, we passed, I remember seeing 3 Blighted Bats in the draft, and I remember seeing a Nefcrop Entangler, and I remember seeing some Rock Spearmasters. And if you look at what your teammates have drafted, if they don't have those cards, then your opponents have them. So you might want to just put Blazing Volley in your main deck because you know that it's going to kill stuff.
Other examples might be like Stinging Shot, for example, if you think your opponents have flying creatures, or, destroy target artifact type of card if you passed some particularly good uncommon or rare artifacts. That makes a lot of sense. So having been a long-time team drafter, has anything changed in the last 10, 15 years about this format? It's played a lot less frequently at the pro level now today.
It's. I think it's changed some because the sets are deeper. I went and looked at the drafts that have happened thus far, and if like Huey and Ben S are both people that have done a lot of team drafts, and they really understand the strategy of it well, and they've done it with a lot of different sets over the history of Magic. They both drafted 3-color decks where they kind of bounced around in their colors a lot more than they would have in an 8-man draft. And what they were trying to do was weaken the deck of the person on their left and try to not pass any good cards to the opposing team. I don't think that works as well as it did 10 years ago, because in the past you used to be able to, if you switched colors enough, you could guarantee that the person on your left was going to have a 3-color train wreck as well. But if you look at what happened in the drafts that Ben S. and Huey did, they had 3-color kind of train wreck decks, and the people on their left didn't. The colors were just deep enough that the people on the left were able to get a 2-color deck still. Like Huey and Ben hurt the card quality of the people's decks that they were trying to take cards out of, but they couldn't force them into playing a 3-color deck like they might have been able to in the past.
Right. So a lot of times in Amonkhet, if you counter draft a really strong card, like let's say you counter draft an Electrify from a player that you think might be playing red, they're probably still going to get a Thresher Lizard or a Pathmaker Initiate, some kind of like average quality creature out of that pack instead of getting the Electrify. So it's not like you can completely erase a pick from them. It's just they have to take the next best card.
Yeah.
Well, we might get to see a little bit of which strategy is going to be more appropriate for Amonkhet, because we have two very different teams facing off tonight. On the one hand, we have Goat Stew of Rich Hohen, Mike Hron, and Jelger Wiegersma. These are sort of, at least for tonight's matchup, these are the old school players. These guys are, almost legendary team drafters that have been around for a long time and have been well known as experts at this format. So they're probably more likely to employ that type of strategy that you were mentioning, where they're bobbing and weaving and trying to, have a higher level of control over the draft.
Well, one thing that's interesting about this team is all the players on this team have teamed with people on other teams in this competition at recent Grand Prix. Like Mike and Rich won a team Grand Prix with Alexander Hayne, one of their opponents tonight, on their team. And
right.
Mike is teamed with Justin and Matt Severa, the Madison squad, to win another team Grand Prix. And I know that Jelger was sort of a substitute for the Scottsdale Foundation at Team Grand Prix, where they finished in the top 4. So these people are definitely kind of 3 ringers at this format that they, I don't know that they've ever played in a team event together before, but they have a lot of experience collectively.
And you've played with Rich before.
Yeah, I played with Rich a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look at their opponents tonight. These are certainly, newer players. These are like the current high-level pros from, the past 4 or 5 years. Alexander Hayne, Steve Rubin, and Mike Sigrist, all near the top of the top 25 leaderboard. Fantastic players. The advantage that this team has is they're going to be extremely sharp. They're going to have played Amonkhet at high levels already at the Pro Tour and, practicing the weeks leading up to the Pro Tour. I think you can expect Alexander Hayne and Steve Rubin to be, some of the sharpest players tonight. Potentially, their advantage is going to be in the gameplay portion. And Mike Sigrist, he's might be the player that has it all. I mean, he's been playing a ton of Magic lately, one of the best current players, but he's also been around a really long time and is notable for his achievements in Limited. What do you think about this team?
Well, Sigrist, people may not know this, but if he has kids now, so he doesn't play as much Magic Online, but if you go back 3 or 4 years, he was probably the best player who was playing a lot in the draft queues. So if you draft a lot on Magic Online and so some of the harder queues, and he also likes the flashback queues, he was probably the absolute hardest competition you could face. He played a ton. I was kind of disappointed that we're not going to get to watch Alexander Hayne draft. We're going to watch Rich instead. Hayne would have been my pick because he's an incredible player, but seeing some of the decks he's drafted, I've never actually watched him draft, but I've seen the decks he's wound up with, and they just look like a disaster a lot of the time. And you kind of wonder, like, what's going on in the draft? Does he know something I don't know, or is he just struggling at the draft and he's making it up because he plays so well in the games? I wanted to see how he navigated the draft. I mean, we'll get to see that in the draft viewer, but we won't get to watch it live.
So Rich Hohen and Alexander Hayne are 2 of the strongest, Canadian Magic players of the past decade. And they had like a little bit of a rivalry going. They played in the finals of Grand Prix Montreal in, I believe it was 2011 or 12. and Rich won. But I once watched an interview with Rich where the coverage person was like, yeah, and you must be so excited to see your prodigy Alexander Hayne having such success after you taught him how to draft. And Rich's response was more or less like, I don't think I want to take responsibility for that. Like, distance myself a little bit. But those guys are definitely, they have a long history of both being friends and rivals. And I think with those two players in particular, this match is going to be a little heated.
I do have to say, though, that Haynes' trash talking on Twitter was incredibly bad.
It was
he
bad.
Really, maybe he spent more time practicing the drafting portion, but his trash talking was just awful, like really, really bad.
I was impressed by Yelger, though. I mean, for a guy that rarely opens his mouth, Yelger was laying some beats. He said, there must be something wrong with the website. I was trying to research my opponents. I can't find any of their good results in team limited Pro Tours. Yeah, those guys were going at it. So, okay, this is the fourth round, as I mentioned, of Team Draft Super League. By fourth round, I mean it's the fourth weekend, or the fourth week that we're playing. It's the final match of the first round of the tournament. So after tonight, all the teams will have played one match, and this is our first unveiling of the second round schedule. So starting already next week, we're going to be jumping right into round two, where Team Madison, who, if you'll remember, defeated my team in the first round, they're going to be playing against the winner of tonight, either Goat Stew or Dem Boys. Then we have in the losers bracket, Gamers Helping Gamers, that's John Finkel's team, against whoever loses tonight. Following that, Peach Garden Oath versus Scottsdale Foundation, that's my team against Paul Rietzel's team. And finally, Channel Fireball versus Limited Resources, that's Ben Stark, Eric Froelich, and Luis Scott Vargas against Marshall Sutcliffe, Kenji Igashira, and Paul Cheon. Those guys are in the winners bracket. Looking at the big picture, the way this tournament works is all the teams that are 2-0 after two rounds, they're right into the top four playoffs. So that's going to be two teams that go 2-0. Any team that goes 0-2 is eliminated. So that means my team is going to be facing elimination, and we're going to really be trying our best to stay in the competition. And the four teams that wind up 1-1 after two rounds will continue to play it out to see which of them can make the top four, joining the 2-0 teams.
Yep. I think we're ready to start the draft.
Yep, the guys playing tonight. This is their first time playing. They're looking to get on the board. Do you have a hunch on who's going to win?
I'm going to go with Rich's team, I think. I think their experience with team drafts is maybe going to play itself out. Although, really, I think that this is going to be a very close match either way. Because it's going to, a lot of times in team limited, you know so much about what's in the other person's deck that a good player can really leverage that information. And all these guys are really good players. So they're all going to be able to do that well. So it's going to come down to somewhat how the packs break and the luck of the draw to an extent. But.
Well, on that note, let's go down to the draft.